Good evening everyone and welcome to an Aussie Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update tonight, the 9th of April 2014. My name's Chris Nitzo, and firstly we'd like to say a huge thank you. It is a very humbling experience today to have achieved a milestone that I'm sure we probably didn't even dream of at the start when we created Aussie Cyclone Chasers in the end of 2011, the start of 2012. We've achieved 100,000 people that now follow us on social media. We've got over 1,000 Twitter followers, and we really have so many hits on our website that we're sort of running out of bandwidth. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen during the Cyclone Chase coming up tomorrow. So folks, what I would like to say to you is thank you, and we really couldn't do what we do without that much support from people. So whether you supported us financially, whether you supported us through just viewing our videos, through letting your mates know about cyclones, whatever it is, thank you very much. And the whole team, that comes from the whole team. Folks, tonight I guess the big issue is Tropical Cyclone Ida. We will be talking at length. This is a serious tropical cyclone threat on the far north Queensland coast. We are hoping that that the system doesn't actually impact the major urban centre of Cairns and Townsville. However, there is increasing potential for that somehow to influence directly those cities. Now, what we're hoping that will happen, and we'll talk about the scenarios later on, is that the cyclone will hit in the far northern parts between Cooktown and Cape Melville, and then track southwards inland, and that way all we get on the coast is some rain and some gales. However, the alternative scenario is possibly quite damaging, and we'll talk about that alternative later on tonight. So the team itself, we are at the ready. Just a quick snippet of some of the stuff that we've been putting into the car today, some of the jerry cans, because we know that as we head towards Cohen there's no diesel fuel, so we needed to fill out a lot of jerry cans. We've got generators, we've got gas stoves, we've got all sorts of safety equipment as well in terms of snatch straps, ropes, winches, a hand winch. We've got yeah, it's just we've got a lot of stuff in the car. It's amazing how it's all fitting actually. We still have to put all the electronics in, and so we can take you on the ride as well up north. Alright folks, that's enough about our team and what we're doing. Let's talk about Cyclone Ida and what it's doing. Alright, here's the little beast. It's now started to move away from PNG, and you can see here through earlier today it was right on the tip of PNG there, and it was really struggling because PNG isn't a flat surfaced country. There's a lot of mountainous terrain up here, and it disrupts the flow of wind and air into the system, particularly at the lower and mid levels, and so it disrupts the low level circulation. So even with that though, even with that disruption, we've seen that the system has been able to maintain very deep convection right around the core of it, and you can see here this very dark shading of cloud suggesting some very deep convection, which means the system is strong regardless of the land interaction here with PNG. So the Bureau of Meteorology track map, you can see Category 3 Tropical Cyclone Ita is going to intensify as it heads further away from PNG into a Category 4 system. At this point in time, the anticipation is that it won't get to Category 5, but it will remain a very strong Category 4. And with any type of situation where the system starts to starts to interact with an upper level trough, and we'll talk about what all that means shortly, but when it starts to interact with an upper level trough, there is always that opportunity for rapid intensification. And that's what we're seeing as the system starts to move a little bit more to the south rather than west-southwest. We're going to see a little bit of interaction with an upper level trough, not enough to shear the system, but possibly enough to intensify it due to something that we call poleward outflow, and we'll talk about what that is shortly as well. So that's from the meteorological perspective. Now from a track map perspective, we can see that today's track map is quite different to yesterday's. We have a lot more error margin down here. We've got an error margin almost down to Innisfail now in this afternoon's update. And the error margin to the north has shifted a lot further south, so Lockhart River is now the northern extent of possible range of tracks for the system. Overall, the system, once again, we've been targeting this area, Cohen to Cooktown, over the last 2 to 3 days. We've sort of had an inkling that this would be happening, and we see the same type of situation here. Cohen to Cooktown over the last 24 hours has been modelled by the Bureau of Meteorology on their track map. Category 4 on impact, and even heading inland as a Category 1 or 2 system. Now, what it does from there, very important, because if it tracks back out over water here, it will reform into a tropical cyclone. And if it remains over water throughout the entire life cycle, you could be looking at some very dangerous conditions, Cooktown, Cairns, all the way through to Townsville, and even possibly further south. So, folks, this is one certainly that North Queensland need to be very alert for. Not alarmed, but alert, and be taking the preparations and the necessary preparations, even if you do not live in the watch area. Can I stress this again? Even if you do not live between Cairns and Lockhart or Cape Grenville, you need to be looking at this system and looking at your cyclone kits to make sure they are up to date, because this is only one type of scenario here modelled by the Bureau. We'll show you now the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre. So this is the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre track, and we can see here the system on the JTWC. Maximum wind speeds sustained for 1 minute is 80 knots, so about 150 k an hour, getting up to about 160 or 65 k an hour, then heading up to about 180 k an hour, and then really as it heads towards Cooktown or the Cooktown Cape Melville region, it intensifies to a maximum wind speed value of 105 knots, so about 200 kilometers an hour sustained over 1 minute. And then continues at 200 kilometers an hour as it pushes just by Cooktown. Continues to be quite an intense tropical cyclone off the coast of Cairns at around about 160 kilometer an hour sustained winds, and then as it pushes further south towards Townsville and Bowen, it starts to weaken out, but still a significant Category 2 or 3 tropical cyclone as it heads down the coast. Not a great scenario, as you can imagine, for the entire east coast of Queensland north of Mackay, but particularly for areas Townsville northwards, and really particularly for areas Cairns or Innisfail northwards. This is a disastrous type scenario with the system tracking not too quickly either as it pushes down at about 10 to 20 kilometers an hour. So you can see that over the next 48 hours, very similar tracks from the Bureau. It's what happens after on Friday that is the key issue here. You can see here it slows down as it heads to Cooktown under less and less of a steering influence, and then starts to recurve to the south and southeast. Really, folks, this is really tough to call as to which scenario is going to eventuate. We can tell you right now that the favoured scenario is probably somewhere between the Bureau of Meteorology and the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre. We're thinking perhaps at this point, this is our own opinion by the way, not the official opinion. We're thinking that it will cross the coast, but we're thinking it will come back out to sea and not remain over land for too long. And in that situation, it may weaken enough to not be a disastrous impact on the coast, but still possibly a damaging one. So, folks, that's our thinking at the moment. Now, obviously, keep up to date with our video tomorrow, because that will hone in on that a lot more. Remember, this is an ever-changing situation, and it's just so finely balanced on a knife's edge that we just don't know which one's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to just track inland for that period in here and remain a low, or whether it's going to track out here offshore and remain a very strong cyclone, or whether it's going to do what I just said there, where it hits land, goes inland a little bit, but not enough to completely wash it out, and then forms into a cyclone as it pops off the coast again. So a lot of variation. And you know, when I say a lot of variation, it's not so much the distances that are varied, it's just such a fine line because of where the coastline is. You know, we're only talking about 100 kilometres in terms of difference, but we're talking about 150 to 200 kilometre an hour difference in wind speeds. So you can imagine just how difficult this one is to forecast by the Bureau, by the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre, and imagine how difficult it is for us to really hone in on a chase target. So when we pierce the actual cloud and look inside the cyclone and look at its anatomy, if you like, so we're now looking right inside the body of the cyclone, we can see that the eye feature is located here, but it's not quite a symmetrical eye feature. We can see this is the area of strongest convection, likely to be also some very strong winds in this particular convective region. Also, this southern eye wall has quite an interesting and quite intense storm cluster there as well. So look folks, earlier today this is the image we had. Now obviously it was being impacted by the mountain ranges here over PNG. As the system pushes out further to the west, southwest and southwest, it's going to encounter really good atmospheric conditions, and it won't be by by those mountain ranges anymore, by any landmass anymore. So it really has a window here of about 48 hours to get itself real. Look at these amazing cloud top temperatures, you know, negative 70 degrees plus, minus up here. You know, these are really cold, high convective cloud tops, folks. This is a serious system, and it's only going to get more serious over time. If we take a look at vertical wind shear, we can see that the system is tracking into 5 to 10 knots of wind shear, and on its forecast track, which is, remembering the forecast track is for it to do this type of thing, we're going to see that the wind shear remains very weak, and so there is absolutely no threat of the system being sheared away anytime soon. For those that want to know about how vertical wind shear, I know we've got a lot of new followers, affects a tropical cyclone. Basically, we need these low values of 5 to 10 knots for a cyclone to be in ideal conditions. Vertical wind shear means the change of direction or wind speeds with height. So cyclones require winds to be coming from either the same direction or being very light as they head up into the atmosphere, because that allows the thunderstorms to develop over a central point. So if the wind shear is too great, so if those upper level winds are strong, what they do is they chop the head off the thunderstorm. So as the thunderstorms try to grow, or as the storms try to grow, what happens is the tops get chopped off by these stronger winds, and the cyclone can't develop those storms right over the middle part of it, and so that's why it can't strengthen. There's no issue here at all for that to happen. Looking at the current steering flow around the environment here, we can see that overall the steering flow is strongest, pushing from east-northeast to west-southwest, and so the system will track in this direction. There is very little doubt as to the system's future track here over the next 24 to 48 hours. However, there becomes a lot more doubt after that. Another big killer of cyclones is dry air, and what we see here is that the system is located where a lot of moist air is in the atmosphere, and so what we see is as the system tracks towards the west, southwest and southwest and possibly even south, we have some drier air here pushing up towards northern Queensland, but we also have the system attached to a monsoon which is pushing a lot of moist air, or advecting, what we call advecting, a lot of moist air into the area of circulation, and so we don't expect this dry air to become an issue as the system tracks towards the far north Queensland coastline. Okay, now what we have here is the mean layer wind analysis of why the system is tracking in the way it is. Now we see here over the Solomons we now have an upper level high developing. It's only just starting to develop. We have a ridge here over Queensland, an upper level ridge over Queensland, and it's aligned from the southeast to the northwest. That is creating a situation where the mean flow, or the steering flow, is from east to west. Now there's very little doubt about that steering flow. Now, what we expect to see happen, though, is we expect that this high here will start to weaken out. And what will then happen is it will be replaced by this upper level trough. So an upper level trough will push into here and will start to push the system in almost an opposite direction to the way it's pushing now. So this is the upper level trough out here, just starting to show its little ugly head, and as it pushes towards the east it will likely capture the cyclone. Now we don't know exactly when that capture is going to happen, and that is why we see such a small but significant variation in where the cyclone goes. So this high will go away, this trough will amplify a little bit. That means push a little bit further to the north and push to the east. This high over the Solomons and Fiji gets a little bit stronger, and remembering that this high over the Solomons and Fiji is already trying to push the system in a southerly direction. So we have a combination of the upper trough pushing east, we have this high becoming stronger, the combination of which are likely to push the system in a south to southeast direction. Now, when that actually happens, we can't tell you. We don't know. There is too much model variation. But I'll tell you what, it's going to come down to just a few hours, folks, as to whether it becomes a destructive scenario for the North Queensland coast or whether it just becomes a rain scenario for the North Queensland coast. Okay, so let's take a look at the UK Met model and its ensemble. The UK Met model is the number 2 in terms of accuracy, and we see that overall the UK Met model hits the coast around Cape Melville, which is pretty well par for the course from most of the guidance. And however, we have a lot of outliers now in the UK. We have about 6 or 7 of the 20 odd members that now push the system offshore, doesn't make landfall, and we also have one outlier there that actually makes landfall right over the top of Cairns. So folks, there is quite a little bit of uncertainty as to that exact point where the system pushes south and southeast. As I showed you, we just don't know when that upper trough starts to take hold of the system and when that upper ridge goes away. So until that becomes clearer, folks, all I'm going to do is keep showing you these spaghetti model plots where half of them have the system offshore, half of them have the system hitting the coast and pushing south on the coast. Once again, this scenario where the system is just offshore, remember, it's only about 100 or 150 kilometers offshore, so it's very, very close to the coast. So you're still copping some pretty nasty effects from the tropical cyclone. You won't be copping the Category 4 winds, but you will be copping gale force winds and some very squally showers. And obviously, being particularly to the southern quadrants, you are in with a chance there of the isolated tornado coming off the water. So folks, here's the GFS model, and once again what it's predicting. This is as of this morning's model runs. We can see that the system hits or gets very close to Cooktown, falls all the way down through Cairns, falls right near Townsville, almost crosses the coast, if not crosses the coast again around the Whitsundays, and then pushes southeast away from Australia towards New Zealand. So that's the GFS. Now the GFS has been extremely consistent on this scenario. It's been predicting this now for 3 or 4 days in a row. Now I know that a lot of agencies are pretty quick to discount GFS scenarios, but at this point in time, I'll tell you what, this could be producing the goods. The GFS model is one that we don't like to use before a cyclone is developed, because it tends to develop cyclones all the time. Once a cyclone is developed, the GFS can model the steering influences quite well. But as I say, it's often discounted by a lot of agencies because of that tendency to overdevelop things at the start. The NavGem model is not a very accurate model, but it's been predicting a very similar scenario now for a while too. However, the NavGem model keeps the system well and truly offshore, so a lot further. So the most you'd probably be experiencing is gales around the Bowen area. So folks, this is an outlying scenario to the east, but it is a scenario we need to pay some attention to because some of the ensemble guidances are trending that way. Obviously, that's a sigh of relief to a lot of Queenslanders if it does take that particular option. When we start to have a look at some of the higher res model data from the experimental FIM9, we can see that the system pushes and hits just to the north of Cooktown, pushes right down the coast, right along the coast. Now, this is not too bad a scenario in terms of a cyclonic event because the system remains just over land. But once again, it's only so close. It could just be 50 k's further to the east and it remains a Category 3 on its track down the coast. 50 k's further to the west and it's a low and washes out. Or right where it is there, it's a very weak cyclone and still being fed by a lot of moisture from the Coral Sea, but also having the mountain ranges of the Great Dividing Range to contend with. So really it's sort of tinkering right on the borderline of being a significant cyclone to being a monsoon or tropical low. So this type of scenario is a bit of a hedge your bets each way scenario, and you can see here gets off the coast around the Townsville area and reforms into a more significant low or weak cyclone as it pushes further to the southeast. Pretty similar scenario shown by its bigger brother too, with the FIM8 model, which is a lower resolution version, but showing a very similar scenario, hitting just to the north of Cooktown, pushing to a southerly direction, hitting just coming off the coast around the Townsville to Bowen area, and forming into a weak TC, or possibly even an extratropical low by the time it gets off the coast of Sandy Cape. The American multi-model consensus of charts here suggests that the system will be so close, it's just so tight here as to whether it's going to cross the coast and then track in a south-southeast direction parallel to the Queensland coast and remaining very close to it. So folks, this is a serious potential threat, and as I say, even if you're outside of the watch area by the Bureau of Meteorology and further to the south, you need to just make sure that your cyclone kits are ready in case it adopts one of these just offshore options. Now, the orientation of our coastline lends itself to a coastal crossing even on a southerly moving tropical cyclone, so please be aware of that. We can see intensity forecasts here through the roof in some of the models, but that's to be expected. They're not really accurate with that sort of thing, but we could be seeing a wind gusts of about 240 kilometers or 250 kilometers an hour from the tropical cyclone. Now, once again, those wind gusts tend to occur on areas of downslope winds and on areas near the exposed coastline. As you head into the suburbs of your particular town or city, you tend to see about 20 or 30% less wind than you do right along the exposed coastline. If you do lie down a downwind slope, so for instance, if we look at Cooktown, in a little bit more detail in case they do get a hit here from the cyclone, if we look at them on Google Earth, we have Mount Cook here, and what will happen is as we get those... So if we take a look at, for instance, a place like Cooktown that could be in line for this tropical cyclone, or could be in line with a hit from this cyclone, we see that it has Mount Cook National Park here. Now, Mount Cook itself could lend some parts of Cooktown to be under the influence of some downslope winds, and by downslope winds, what happens is that as the winds come in from the southeast, rather than being a windbreak as such, they actually hit the top of the mountain or go up the mountain, and then as they come down, they're actually accelerating on the downward slope. So these areas, particularly here at the bottom of the mountain, could suffer some pretty extensive damage or some wind gusts that would not be expected from a Category 4 cyclone. So you might actually see wind gusts that are stronger than you would expect. Those of you in Cairns, for instance, know exactly what I'm talking about when you get these sort of winds that come up over the range, and these suburbs down here tend to cop some very, very strong winds when you get westerlies coming over the range. So that normally happens when you've got a cyclone or a monsoonal low out in the Coral Sea and you're getting those westerlies coming off the tablelands. It's these suburbs that tend to suffer some really bad downslope wind damage. Alright, let's take a look at the rainfall analysis here. Tomorrow we're going to start to see those showers starting to push onshore as Cyclone Ita pushes westwards. We're going to start to see rainfall anywhere from about Ingham northwards along the coastal strip particularly, possibly getting some moderate falls of rain towards the end of the day on Thursday over the Cairns northwards coastline. As we head to Friday, we're really going to zoom into Queensland for this one, because I think it's more important to talk about that rather than our continuation of isolated showers and storms over the northwest. So let's zoom into Queensland and let's have a better look here as to what's happening on Friday. We can see here on Friday that anywhere Ingham northwards is receiving some moderate to heavy falls of rain, but particularly in the vicinity of the coastal crossing or the coastal, I won't say crossing because that's not 100% certain at this stage, but the coastal approach of Cyclone Ita, will see some very heavy rainfall in that Cooktown northwards through to Cape Melville area. Also could be seeing some pretty decent rain around the Lockhart River area on that northwesterly fetch, and also seeing some showers and storms pushing as far west as Weipa. Now, be aware that some of the guidance continues to push the system west. It is very unlikely that that will happen, but for some of the guidance it does push it west. That's why we get this little bit of a skewed or increased rainfall threat here around Weipa. It doesn't mean that Weipa's going to get a lot of rain out of it. It just means it's some of the guidance, very, very few of them, are pushing the system west, and that's why we see that increased rainfall figure there. On the Saturday, Cyclone Ita is expected to move south. Whether it moves south and offshore is very important in terms of wind strength, or whether it moves south onshore, you know, we really don't know. But what we can say with quite a bit of certainty is that no matter where it pushes, whether it's just offshore or whether it's onshore, we're going to see big falls of rain, anywhere from Townsville northwards on the Saturday, Townsville to Ingham probably more so Saturday night, but anywhere Ingham northwards through to Cooktown, looking at a very wet Saturday, particularly this Cairns area here, 150 to 200 millimetres. Now remember that this often underestimates big rainfall totals, so just because it says 150 to 200 doesn't mean you won't cop more than that. And we continue to see, we see actually some showers developing all the way down to Rocky on that onshore stream. We'll more than likely start to see a feeder band of the system pushing onshore around the central Queensland coast as well. On the Sunday, Ida continues to move in a southeasterly direction, possibly now offshore around the Bowen to Mackay area. So we see most of that heavy rainfall pushing to the south of Townsville in the central coast with Sunday's area. We continue to see some showers along the north tropical coast, and that could be because some of the guidance is just tipping that Ida will die over here over northern inland Queensland. It won't have a chance to get back out onto the water. If it does that, if it doesn't do that, so if it doesn't get back over water, it's expected to die over northern inland Queensland, and so you're going to continue to see some fairly moderate falls of rain around that area. Remembering, of course, that we still have some outliers that push it onto the Gulf and then back onshore here, and so that's why we see this increase in rainfall around Kawanyama. So once again, there's a little bit of error margin, but most of the model guidance is now tipping this hit on the coast, or get very, very close to hitting the coast, and then tracking almost parallel, possibly grazing the coast on the way down, or tracking just inland of the coast in here and dumping a lot of rain. So folks, the total forecast rain for the next 4 days with huge amounts, especially with Ida pushing in a southerly direction right along the coastline. The 4 days after that, all of that rain pushes offshore here off the central Queensland coastline, and not expected to, it's not expected to graze the coast all the way down to Brisbane. It's expected to graze the coast to about Mackay, maybe just slightly south of that, and then push offshore. That's what most of the guidance is suggesting at the moment. But once again, we have such varying scenarios, and it's only, as I said, it's only on a knife's edge. It's only 100 k's, folks, 100 k's, where some of the guidance keeps it inland and just makes it a rain producer, or 100 k's this way further to the east, and we've got a serious cyclone on our hands, you know, threatening the entire northern coastline. So it's just so close, and it's too close for us to call. We can't make a call on it for you. All we can tell you is, even if you don't live in that Cairns to Cape Grenville area, please make sure you haven't eaten all your cyclone food, just in case the system does take that just slightly offshore track. Alright folks, that's a lot to get through. Thank you very much for listening and watching tonight. Tomorrow night we will be doing this from the road, so it'll be a bit shorter, and for those of you that will be on our live stream, you'll get to hear and see firsthand how I put one of these together. But tomorrow night our update should be coming from around about Cairns or Cooktown. We're not quite sure yet. But you go to our website, ozcyclonechasers.com.au, and then if you want to watch what we're doing as we're doing it, you go to the current chase page here. You click on the current chase page. It tells you what we're doing, and down here will be, oh, there's my ugly head. Down here will be a video stream of what we're doing, and hopefully we'll have video and audio. Sometimes the video is choppy, and that's because we don't have enough bandwidth, or the signal is quite weak in terms of the 3G, 4G signals. Down here will be a chat room. You can have a chat to each other. You can have a chat to us while we're streaming live. So if sometimes our stream cuts out, we can still chat to you live anyway. Alright folks, so it's a very interactive tool. Hopefully we're going to see if we can get our live data from a couple, or at least one of our weather stations, to go live here as well, so you can see what we're experiencing weather-wise. If we can't do that, we'll try and upload that data as soon as we get back into some civilization, if we are out in the middle of nowhere. Alright folks, so thanks very much for watching, and that's how you can keep track of what we're doing in this tropical cyclone. Stay safe, get prepared, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow night. Good night.